Okay. Well, welcome. And I want to explain that we've made a decision not to continue the reading of the Psalms because with the little limited time we have, it perhaps takes up more time in terms of the progress we can make. So for now, we will stop the reading of the Psalm and go straight into the Torah discussion. And we'll start with the bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Hi, Shira Beth. Good to see you again. We made a decision to stop reading the Psalm and just to focus on the Rashi, on the Parsha, and because we have so little time and it seemed like it was taking up more time. I also gave some more thought to your comment yesterday on, being a toshav and taking it by right, and definitely your take on it supports the translation that's there in Sefaria. I was just thinking to myself that that wasn't the way to get into a business deal, so that's why I took it in a different kind of way. But I actually think that your interpretation is probably the more accurate one in terms of how one reads it. So, Yeshar Kolchech. I'm going to, second here.
You might have already said something about this, but can we dedicate our learning to the memory of Rabbi Sachs?
Yes, I have not said it, but I think that's a lovely idea. And certainly this morning's learning for sure in his memory. And we should only be worthy of his level of brilliance and knowledge, etc.
Amen.
And he was a pretty brilliant guy. Yeah. And young, relatively young in my humble opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So in here, it's good to see all of you. So here we are, right here.
We're on verse 10.
Yes, I believe we are. The Ephron, Yoshev, and Ephron, interesting tense here, was sitting betoch b'nei Chet, amongst the children of Chet. Vayan Ephron, and Ephron spoke up. Ephron the Hittite spoke up at Abraham or responded. Ephron the Hittite answered at Abraham, Be'oznei v'nei Chet, in the hearing of the children of Chet, L'chol ba'eshar iro, for all those who entered the gate of his city, Lamor saying. So that's going to be a quote following here. And we will take a look at verse 10. The Ephron Yoshev. So Rashi jumps on this because it's more of a gerund, a present participle, than like is sitting. Ketiv chaser. So it looks like Ephron Yashav. Let's take a look at the text itself. Yeah. So you can see that in the Torah text, it looks like the Ephron Yashav, and Ephron was sitting instead of Ephron is sitting. So here we go. Ketiv chaser, it is written without the vav, so this is the interpretation. Oto hayom minuhu shoter alehem. On that very day, they appointed him as an officer over them. Why? Mipnei chashivuto shel Avraham, on account of Abraham's importance. Shahayat tzarich lo Allah legdula. So this is sort of Shahayat tzarich lo, so which he required. So the question is, who is the law, who is the him that it's referring to. And Safaria interprets this as saying that they wanted equality between Abraham and the person he was negotiating with. So that's why the him here, according to that interpretation, would mean that Ephron required it, Allah ligdullah, and for that reason he went up to greatness. He increased his importance amongst them. So how does this Yoshev work? So I took a look at Siftei Chachamim, and this is sort of how they understand it. So if it said Ephron Yashav, we would simply understand that Ephron was one of the people who was sitting among them, and there'd be no need to interpret it any further, that it was just informing us that the Torah was simply informing us that Ephron was one of the let's say the elders of the town, that he already was one of the elders. But the fact that it says Yoshev, it takes it out of the perfect tense. In other words, it's no longer completed action. So now it has the implication of the fact that he did, in fact, he was one of the elders, but now he was amongst them in a different kind of way. That at that moment, because there's in modern Hebrew, this would be, Yoshev would be a present tense, would indicate present tense. So something that happened at that moment. So that's why they're looking at this word and extracting that interpretation. So this shel Avraham shayat tzarich lo, shayat tzarich lo. Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like the law has to refer to Ephron. Yeah, because of this verb referring to Ephron. He went up to greatness. So that clarifies the law. All right. L'chol ba'eshar iro, according to, or for all those who entered the gate of the city. Shekulam, and what's the implication? In other words, coming to the gate of the city. Shekulan batlu mimel achtan, because all of them means this, all of them ceased their labors. They took a break. Uva'u ligmol chesed lasara, and they came to do an act of gemilut chasadim. They came to, and we know that levayat hamet, accompanying the dead to burial, is considered gemilut chasadim, an act of loving kindness, and they wanted to express this act of loving kindness to Sarah. And
Rabbi, I just want to say one thing about
go ahead.
About the Safaria translation, about the earlier note. It says in Safaria, it says that Ephron was elevated, not that he became great, but he was elevated by
Right.
by the appointment, and so it wasn't his doing that brought him to a higher level, but that they felt that they needed a match, that Abraham shouldn't be negotiating with somebody lower than him, so they elevated him.
Right. No, that was what I was trying to say. I may not have said it well enough. They may have used more elegant language than I did, but that was the implication I was trying to make.
Okay.
Not that he himself did it to himself.
Okay.
All right. But nevertheless, it is shahayat tzarich lo. He required it, even in their eyes, in the eyes of the people of Chet. Okay.
Right.
All right. So no, thank you for clarifying that, Lauren. That was what I was trying to imply. So this last little sentence here, here we have a rabbinic interpretation of people that are non-Jewish, and which I think comes to speak of people that are not Jewish, but are clearly doing something that involves respect and concern and things like that. And this sort of competition, this general attitude that I find at times, which tends to denigrate non-Jews or try to suggest that the Bible supports those kinds of attitudes. I mean, you come across something like this, And I think it counters those sorts of arguments. And I think part of those arguments come, I mean, there's no doubt that there's evidence, there's certainly elements within the Torah and elsewhere that would seem to support that attitude. But on the other hand, I think it also comes out of a sense of competition, which I don't think is helpful. And here I have something that tends to counter that attitude, because I think there's something so lovely about the people in the city here, wanting to honor Sarah and also honor Abraham. So, here, okay, so we
Well,
were,
and of course, Abraham, is esteemed by, three huge major religions. It's not, it's still not just the Jewish people honoring him and
yes,
his family.
true. But then I think those religions either, um, hmm, I think in some ways there's still a level of competition in that we have this successionism, or if we want to call it that, if that's the right term, meaning that the true Jews are now Christians, or the true Jews, the true descendants of Abraham
And I will
are
say that not all Christians believe that, and
no, of
certainly I don't think
course,
Muslims do.
yes,
But to me, all this, like, everywhere in every bit of the story, we have people recognizing um Abraham's greatness, of all cultures and all places, and that he's been to. And it seems like that could be, like, supposedly there was a true Abraham who historically existed. All this recognition from all over may have led to his being so esteemed, and he's, to me it seems like it's a straight path.
hmm hmm yeah, I'd like to think it is. Um, Exactly that. And that, but the point is here, these people, aren't converts. They're not people such as Christians and Muslims who clearly have some link to Judaism and Jewish values and Jewish beliefs. These are people who are pagans that we're talking about here. And I know one can get into the, is it historical, etc. But again, I like to move sort of a little bit away from that and say, but nevertheless, what's the point, right? The point is that the Torah is trying to teach us something about how we look at other people or people with differing beliefs, and don't necessarily relegate them to some, you know, just to totally
Well,
despise them or whatever.
I don't think I brought up an argument about historicity by saying let's assume this is a historical thing.
Right.
The assumption that it is doesn't argue that it's not, and what would that mean if it isn't? It's
Right.
the assumption that, yes, this is what happened and this is a straight path.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. All right. Ephron's words. Lo Adoni. No, my Lord. Shma'eni. Listen to me. Hasadeh natati lacha. I have given you, in other words, as it were to say, I have already given you the field. V'hama'ara, and the cave asher bo, which is in it. Lecha natatiha, to you I have given it. Le'enei vnei ami, in the presence of all my, in the presence of the children of my people. Natatiha lach, I have given it to you. Kvor meitecha, go ahead and bury your deceased. So, lo Adoni, sorry, lo Adoni, no, my Lord. Lo tikne ota bedamim. You will not acquire it through money. Natati lacha, I have given it to you. Harehu kamor shenatatiha lacha. It is as if I have already given it to you. So this is, whether or not this is a sincere conversation, or whether or not this is a convention, a way in which one enters into this bargaining mode, we'll have to, we'll have to see. Okay. Uh, here. I want to find the right place. Right here. Vayishtachu Abraham. So Abraham prostrated himself. He bowed down. Lifnei Am Haaretz, before all the people. See, there's no Rashi on that. Vaydaber el Ephron bo iznei Am Haaretz lemor. And he spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people, saying, Ach im ata. However, if you, Lush Ma'eni, would please listen to me, Natati Kesef Hasadeh. I have already given you. So this is sort of the implication. Remember, we've got this natati, natatiha, natatiha. So this use of the perfect tense. So in other words, consider it as if the money is already given to you. I have given you the money for the field. Kach mimini, take it from me. Ve'ekbara et meti shama, so that I can bury my deceased there. Ach imata. However, if you please would listen to me. Ata omer li lishmoa lacha. You're asking me to listen to you, velikach bechinam, and to take the field for gratis. Ani, however, efshi bechach. This is not something that's possible for me. This is not what I want. Ach imata. However, if you, Lush Ma'eni, would please listen to me, halavai vatish Ma'eni. So Rashi is interpreting this ach imata Lush Ma'eni as halavai. In other words, would it were vatish Ma'eni, that you should listen to me. Natati, and again, past tense here. Uh, okay, so he simply says, donner, belaz in French, geben, to give. Mikan hu etzli. This is muchan hu etzli. I have set aside the money. I have it for you. V'halavai, and would it were, natati lachakvar, had I already given it to you. I would have already given you the money. I have it ready, available, and it's something I would have given to you already. Um,
So in the Rashi, it says, I give perfect with present. It says sense, but maybe it means tense. I'm not
yeah,
sure. It says
yeah,
perfect with present sense. And then it says done, Donne.
yeah.
English, I give.
Right. Donner in
No,
French.
not donne, done. Donne is like given, something that's been given, and this
So
is
it's
present tense.
okay. So my understanding is that in French, when you want to use to define a verb, if you want to, just like in Hebrew, you use the third person masculine past tense. In French, you use, like aller, donner, or something.
Well, it
So
doesn't have
yeah, I
an
know it doesn't
accent.
spell it that way. No.
It doesn't spell it as donne, it spells it as done. It doesn't have an accent or a
Right.
Z, for a.
So what you're saying is that it's trying to also give the tense, that the point that the Rashi here is that he's giving the tense of the verb.
The Rashi at the beginning of the in Safari it says twice, I give.
Okay, so notice in the Hebrew, do you see that there's a sin here?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, and there's also a yud here. So
Mm-hmm.
it seems to me that if I were to spell it out, let's say I were to spell it out, I would spell it D-O-N. I'd have to put in another N just because of
Right.
the French, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
E-S, E-S.
Well, that would
Okay,
make it
it's a
an
date.
informal second person,
Mhm.
and it would have to have a Z to be
Okay.
formal, and I would think they would use formal language.
So again, remember, we got two challenges here. One
Mm-hmm.
is it's not modern French. It's
Right.
it's
That's true. That's
middle
true,
French, number one.
which I
And the
don't know.
second thing, then it's how it's spelled. okay,
Mhm.
in the Hebrew, and how accurate that is, because the people who were doing the manuscripts or doing the typefacing or whatever in the early printed editions were not necessarily familiar with French, okay?
Right.
And then geben, okay, in the Yiddish means to give.
Hmm.
So in other words, whoever put in the Yiddish understood the French as meaning to be the infinitive.
Then that would, oh yeah, in
And
modern French, that would have
that's
an R
why
at the end.
yeah,
But
exactly. ER
um,
for don't know.
anyway, but
That's
I'm just
why
saying
I
what
just want you to
Sepharia
know.
says.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not.
It says I give on Sepharia, so I don't.
Yeah,
It could be wrong
right.
though.
Well, again, right or wrong is going to be hard to. I'm just using the information have here on my page here, and that's with us. You know how deeply researched the Sepharia translation is. You know, based on manuscripts. I mean, there are what are called critical editions. You may be familiar with this already. And in critical editions, they go through all the various manuscripts and early printed editions. There's some basic early editions, early manuscripts, like in the Vatican Library and elsewhere, where they've gone over every single word. And very often they'll have what is called an apparatus at the bottom, where basically they show you the different versions. So this is also, I mean, we're not dealing with that element of scholarship here. We're just trying to get a basic understanding of how Rashi is interpreting this. But sometimes those differences, I mean, here the distinction isn't terribly significant, but sometimes in other issues, the differences in manuscripts or the early printed editions and the differences can make a difference in terms of how you understand it. So we have all these kinds of challenges when you start digging deep in terms of understanding this.
Yep.
Okay.
But not so much here. It's kind of a minor thing.
No, here it is a minor thing, but there were two reasons why I went the way I went. So just to let you know my
Yeah.
thing. Let's see. Let's go back here. Vayaan answered Ephron et Abraham, Lemorlo, saying to him, Adonai, my Lord, Shma'eni. Again, listen, look at how many times they're saying Shma'eni, because they're coming from two sides and they're bargaining essentially. But it's sort of interesting the way the bargaining's going. But here's where this is going to be the final element of the bargaining. Adonai Shma'eni, my Lord, hear me out. Eretz, a land, arba me'ot shekel kesef, worth 400 shekels of silver. Beini uveincha mahi, between you and me, what is it? What's the difference? So, he's sort of saying it isn't worth that much. At least what it's sounding like is that he's saying, 400 shekels, big deal. That's pin money, right? The et mecha kavor, and your deceased bury, so that you can bury your deceased. So again, it's sounding like he's saying to Abraham, it ain't any big deal. No big deal. Please take it. But you have to understand, and we even do it nowadays, right? If it really is so little to him, why is he telling him the price of it? And the rabbis are quick to pick that up. All right. If you really, really don't care, you don't mention a price. That's the implication here. So whether or not he's just being cagey, or whether or not this is simply the way in which bargaining took place between two people, I don't know for sure. I think, though, that in terms of the traditional interpretation, uh, basically there's an understanding that he's being cagey. Well, and that's from what happens. Okay. Beini uveinecha, between me and you. Bein shnei ohavim, between two people who love each other, kamonu, like us. Mahi, kashuva. lichlum, of what account of it is at all. Ela hanach et hamecher, but rather, so they're taking this now seriously, and that he's meaning this. At least that's what it's sounding like. But don't pay attention to the price, the et meitcha kavor, but go ahead and bury your deceased. So here we go. And we'll see if there's any more about this general thing. Vayishma Abraham el Ephron. So this is what's interesting. So it says Abraham, we could translate it as Abraham listened to Ephron, but as Lisa will tell you, the word Shama can also mean understand. So in other words, Abraham understood what Ephron was driving at. And what happens? Vayishkol Abraham leEphron, and Abraham weighed out to Ephron et hakesef, the silver, asher this I imagine should be a dagesh there, asher diber be'oznei v'nei chet, of which he spoke in the hearing of the children of Chet, arba me'ot shekel, 400 shekels, kesef of silver, over la socher. I believe the translation is like current merchant's money. Okay,
Great,
but
yeah.
over passing the merchant. In other words, currency, right? Literally,
It's just at the
currency.
going rate,
Yes.
going
Okay.
merchant's rate, yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's see what it says. Okay.
And we all know this one,
Yes.
the spelling change in Ephron.
Yes, exactly. Vayishkol, yes. Vayishkol Abraham leEphron. Abraham weighed out to Ephron. So we notice that here the word Ephron has a vav in it. We could check other examples too. There's Ephron with a vav in it. Let's go back a little bit, see.
It had a vav every time until now.
That's the point. That's what I'm trying to point out. There's the vav in Ephron. However, now Ephron doesn't. Ephron does not have a vav. And Rashi's going to pounce on that. And he quotes the Gemara in Bacharot 50, Chaser vav. The vav is missing in Ephron. Why? The Lefi Amar harbe, because on the one hand, on the upfront of things, he was saying a lot, meaning he was being extremely generous in terms of what he was saying. But he didn't even do a little. And so, again, Bama Matzia, etc., Shinatal Mimenu Shkalim Gedolim, because he took from Abraham large shekels. In other words, shekels of great value, Kantarin centurions. In other words, they were worth 100 whatevers, okay? Shne'emar over la socher, because he was saying that this was passing merchants' money, current merchants' money, shemit kablim b'shekel b'chol makom. In other words, they would accept this type of shekel in every place because of its full value. V'yesh makom, and there are places sheshkalehem gedolim, where their shekels are of full value, shehen kantarin, because they are centurions, centinar, and centennial, the laws in Old French or in translated into foreign language.
Yeah, he says centenaria instead of centurions, but yeah, and then in French centenars.
Yeah, I've heard of the money referred to as centurions.
I'm
Yeah,
just looking at what it says, yeah.
right, of course. All right, so here we go.
So
And
I
then,
guess he's like, so he charged him retail price. He didn't even give him a break and charge him wholesale, but I guess full merchant's value is
yeah,
retail.
yeah, and of
With a
course it
large
was saying
markup.
yes, or beyond.
Mhm.
Okay, one could say that this is where we see the very first time of a funeral expenses being extremely high, that it's all there in the Torah to begin with. So, I mean, look, here's the point. When you have to bury somebody, you're not in a bargaining position. It's not like you can be taking a month to check out various offers and do this kind of thing. You're basically held at bay by the person who's offering the service. And whatever they're going to charge you, you can't really sit and argue.
Well, could Abraham not have insisted that he pay for it when it seems like at the beginning Ephron was just saying, go ahead, have it, it's yours? Couldn't he have just done it then?
Okay, again, there's some real amazing subtlety going on in terms of, okay, in terms of this. We know already that when the king of Sodom offered Abraham the booty, and remember that particular thing going on in Lech Lecha, I believe, and Abraham said, "I wouldn't take a shoelace from you." And there's a real sensitivity about who you accept favors from. And you
Mhm.
want to be very careful about who you wind up, in a sense, owing. Because when somebody does a favor to you, or for you, in some senses, they have an advantage over you.
I get
There's
it.
a
I get
there's
it.
an owing that you have. And so Abraham would not want to, and especially if we accept Ephron's character, you want to be so careful about who you accept gifts from. There's a story about a fellow, by a great rabbi, he's a rabbi in the Talmud by the name of Rav. Okay, I think his full name was Abba Arifa. He's a major player in the Talmud, and the story goes that he never accepted gifts from anyone, never accepted favors from anyone. Look at what's going on right now, where I understand, and forgive me for entering politics for a moment, where basically Trump is trying to suggest that he has bought the Supreme Court. And I think he actually says that Justice Amy has to pay him back. So there's a real sense here why Abraham would not have accepted Ephron's offer.
Quid pro quo.
Yeah, well, there
The
is.
offer
There is.
might not
And
have
I,
been
yeah,
sincere anyway. If he had behaved as if the offer to take it for free was sincere, that would maybe have been a violation of the norms of politeness. In other words, out of politeness or some kind of respect, Ephron said, "Oh, it's yours, just take it."
right,
But if
exactly,
Abraham had taken him up on that, that would have
right,
violated the norm, which was you don't actually take that seriously. You just take that as a sign of respect or something.
right. And it's a bargaining convention. So it's a way to bargain in. So that's one of the reasons why I went that direction. But I think, in all fairness, we can play around with this, and we can look at it and say, Ephron, if maybe Ephron was sincere to begin with. But the trouble is that mentioning of 400 shekels at the last point there just clearly, at least as far as I'm concerned, clearly indicates that he truly, it was not a sincere offer, and that had Abraham taken him up on it, Ephron would have wanted to take advantage of it, of that
And
situation.
why else would he have lost his vav
Of
if he weren't being a little greedy or
good,
insincere?
good point. Good point. By the way, in the Midrash Rabbah that says it about it, they talk about it. They quote a verse from Proverbs to introduce the whole story, and it's a really great proverb, and talks about something to the effect that a generous person does well, and that a person who's stingy or has it's I think it's called something ayin. I can't think of what kind of eye you have, like a stingy eye, right? In the end will lack. And they say in the end will lack, taking a letter out of Ephron's name. Now again, name, right? Reputation, right? Person's reputation. And it's so cool that trying to guard your reputation and being concerned about it is a sign of greatness, and civilization, as far as I'm concerned. And look at behavior these days. We've come so far and we haven't come so far. It just depends. Pick and choose how far we've come. So what follows? And I remember this actually, I'm not sure if it was a Bible class that I had back in seminary or whether it was an article I read, but what follows in a sense sounds like a deed. In other words, where they are quoting the deed, the title deed. So, Vayakom stay
It's
Ephron.
after 10.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yes it is. Let me stop the share. Okay. Well, what do you know? So time goes quickly when you're having fun. I'm going to say farewell to our Facebook friends and hope that they were able to enjoy this morning. All right.